Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Catoni, a member of the Michigan ASLA DEI Committee. It's my pleasure to introduce Taewook Cha, founder and principal of Supermass Studio, a prominent landscape architecture practice in New York City. With over 25 years of experience, Taewook has been a driving force in enhancing public spaces within complex urban environments. He serves as an executive board member at ASLA New York and co-chairs its DEI committee. Now, I'd like to hand it over to Taewook for his webinar on landscape, people, and their stories.
Thank you, Nick, and good evening, everyone. My name is Taewook Cha. I'm a founding principal at Supermass Studio based in New York City. And I'm also a co-chair of the DEI committee at ASLA New York, as Nick introduced. It is my honor tonight to be invited to Michigan ASLA's Prominent Diverse Perspective webinar series. We like it so much that at ASLA New York, we started our own webinar series called Dialogue for BIPOC Professionals. So it's very meaningful to be featured on this webinar tonight. So with that, let me share my presentation screen here. Okay, thumbs up if you see the title screen. Do you see the title screen, Nick?
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, great. So my talk tonight, titled it Landscape, People, and Their Stories. And it goes back, I'm gonna start with the landscape, how I see landscape and how has it evolved over time as a landscape architect. So back in the early days when I was an emerging landscape architect, there was a time when we thought the future of landscape architecture depending on how we can conceptualize important keywords to represent the landscape we create. So these two images from like early 2000, like 2004, when I was with field operations, we did flyers like this to represent kind of core ideas of the work that we did. Like here, urban life forms to represent the three keywords, and together, everything they do is about urban life forms, which was pretty cool at the time. In circa 2008, when I joined Ido AECOM as a design director in their New York office, we did this kind of flyer to talk about our practice, like a fusion practice. We talk about the words like synthesis, the fusion. And we thought those are important things, but then those times have passed. And as I become more experienced, I get to meet more people throughout my practice, throughout my projects, and my focus has shifted. And it more and more, it becomes about the people who come to the landscape and the story they tell in the landscape that we create. So one of the example is the Mulberry Commons Park in downtown Newark. This is a new urban park in the center of Newark, which used to be a huge parking lot. And New York has the long history of prosperous urban life, which declined quite rapidly in the years. You can see in the beautiful skyline of the downtown here, the glimpse of the prosperous past of the city. So maybe not many people know about this, but Newark used to be a very prosperous leading industrial city in the East Coast. It's known as a brick city because of its beautiful brick buildings. But it led to a rapid decline, culminating in 1967 riots, followed by 1970s failed urban renewal, which left a lot of downtowns vacant. So this was the site of the Mulberry Commons Park when we started. It was a large vacant surface parking lot with a big warehouse empty and vacant. Right next to it was the Newark Penn Station, an important transit center connecting New York City to Newark, down to Philadelphia, and up to Boston. But the Amtrak rail track here also effectively separates the downtown and the residential neighborhood on the other side as an effective barrier. So the importance of this park was a critical urban link connecting between the downtown here and the Ironbound community neighborhood on the other side. And formerly, it was separated by this Newark Penn Station and Penn Station rail tracks. So this new park here, together with the new pedestrian bridge built over the track, will connect the two neighborhoods, Ironbound and the downtown, as a critical pedestrian link, which is the more very common part here and the bridge. So this is the plan of the park that we designed, starting from the Ironbound community neighborhood here on the right side here, coming through the new pedestrian bridge. There are a series of these kind of intimate terrace garden spaces, transitioning into larger community open spaces of event lawns and event plaza. Responding to the larger downtown civic programs and also a Prudential concert and ice hockey arena. So this is what we call the botanical terrace. This is the first terrace that greets the neighborhood people as they cross the anticipated pedestrian bridge from the Ironbound neighborhood. And you can see the beautiful lush green landscape with a view of the Prudential Center Arena in the background. The abandoned warehouse is renovated into a mixed-use office space called Ironside. So we expect a young, creative, techy type of new workforce coming in here. So we created these kind of outdoor spaces with the recreation, entertainment, with the young creatives in mind. We also added this playscape. There was a lot of talk about whether it's playground, playscape. We intentionally avoided creating like typical playground here and made it into playscape using more sculptural climbing structures or unusual play features. One of the features we proposed was this slide, because it's a playground. We have to have a slide, but we didn't want to have a typical slide. So instead, we designed this super wide slide connecting the upper terrace and the lower area of the playscape areas. And when we created this big slide, when we changed the scale or the width of the slide, something very interesting happened. It allowed grown-ups to change their notion of the playscape or slide. And the full grown-ups here started lining up together with the younger kids to take their turns in the slide before going back to their grown-up self to do the grown-up stuff in their offices. But the most rewarding moment of the park happened during this breast cancer awareness walk shortly after the park opening in 2019. This was the American Cancer Society's the Stride Against the Breast Cancer Walk event. When they had this event, people from Newark came from all corners of the city, gathered in the park in pink to advocate for the breast cancer awareness. And people started coming to the park and really started telling their own story. Here, there is a very moving message here, like rest in paradise, my beautiful little sister. And when people start sending messages like this. They make this place into their own in their very personal way, and it becomes their own park. The park was also the place of the manifestation of the public pride, the civic pride, and social justice. So to these people, this is the place where they can express their support for the public justice. So the park became the place of many activities in downtown Newark that the city hadn't seen before. And you don't often see these kind of activities or programmings in a city like Newark, but the Mulberry Commons Park provide the venue to allow to all these things happen. So you see here various activities like the concert events, poetry readings, birthday parties, the Break the Cycle, a domestic violence awareness ride, like food trucks, night market, book readings, all kind of things that you would expect in a good middle-class city, but New York hadn't seen before. This park allowed that to happen. The park also saw the first winter village that hadn't seen in New York before, with the ice skating rink and igloos and all those things. And it introduced the new activities to the inner city kids in New York. So here there's a testimony from 13-year-old Jenny Haynes, inner city black kid from Newark. It's a new experience. I've never done ice skating before. Activities like ice skating was not accessible to a lot of inner city kids like Jay here, but we brought the ice skating here, and they were happy to have this kind of experience in the park. So these are the faces of the real people of Newark that I collected through the social media. And these people all came here to celebrate their cultural heritage, their city, and telling their stories in their own ways. The second project I want to talk about is Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin Riverfront Park. This is on the other side of the country in the Midwest. This is Wisconsin Rapids is in the central Wisconsin. And Wisconsin Rapids is in a way very similar to Newark. It's a industrial city that has a prosperous past, rapidly declining, and decided to use the public realm improvement to bring back their city. But it's also very different from Newark in many ways. It's a very small city, whereas Newark is a big, large city in the East Coast. It's also a very white city, whereas Newark was primarily a black city. But the problems they faced was very similar. So just like Newark, Wisconsin Rapids was known as a mill town. It started out with the paper mill industry. It's known as a river city because of the mills that allow their business or industry to happen. And thanks to their paper mill industry, city has a great public recreation program. For instance, they have this innovative swimming pool using the dam water. City has a rich city life in the past. And Wisconsin Rapids used to be the smallest American city that has the Fortune 500 corporate headquarters, thanks to its paper industry. But we all know what happens to the paper industry. It's a rapidly declining industry. And city decided to shift their industry from paper to more service and medical tech-oriented industry. But to retain their local talent and attract new, younger, creative talents to the city, they decided to start with a public realm improvement. And their idea was if they improve their public realm, people will stay here and people will come here. So we did the overall master plan of the entire waterfront on both sides of downtown. And we identified 5 pilot projects to start the implementations. So for instance, Demis Park here used to be underutilized green space with no programming. And we designed a series of meandering passes, picnics, fitness, with originally a new shorelines that can take the regular flooding from the spring flooding from the dam. And also the aquatic recreation is very important here, together with the Wisconsin River. So we have a canoe kayak launch in the background with the shade pavilions. So this is how the park was realized, with the picnics and fitness and families and children, and it became a new center of the community to come out here. And again, the aquatic sports is a very central to the life of Wisconsin Rapids here. So we added a fishing pier and a canoe kayak launch with the shade structure that kind of reflect the river flows. So on the opening day of the park here, you can see the guy demonstrating his paddleboard right off from the canoe kayak launch here. But the most interesting person I met at the park was this old lady in a walker in red jacket. So I met her on the opening day of the park, and she turned out to be a 100-year-old lady who was a female fighter pilot during the World War II era. So she was a fierce, strong lady living just down the street on the other side of this Riverview Expressway, three houses down. But she could not come out here because this Riverview Expressway used to block the access to the park area. So what we did, one of the things we did was opening up under the expressway, creating this connecting pedestrian promenade to allow access from the residential neighborhood on the other side of the expressway. So she was the first one to come out to the park in a walker. And now she can walk to the park every day. And that really allows, full access to the park to someone as amazing as her to this park. Swingtones is a very interesting project on the opposite side of the scale. This is a very small installation type of project that we did in New Hampshire wood. This was a project for 3-week sleepaway youth camp in New Hampshire. And the theme of the project, the camp, was design and engineering. So they solicit art installation ideas from artists, architect, designers, engineers. And we won the idea for that year with this idea of tree swings. So the idea was actually pretty simple. We designed this tree swings, metal chimes connected through this pulley system. So when you rock the swing back and forth, it activates the chimes up and down. And these chimes make a beautiful ethereal sound in the forest. And we designed a series of different swings. So it's not just a singular object, but it turns in the forest into a new place. But what was really interesting about this project was how it was built. So there were 88 children aged from 18 to 16 years, 11 to 16-year-old. And the project was essentially developed, finalized, and built by these 88 children during the 3 weeks of summer camp. So we designed the initial concept and we guided them throughout the process. We went to the camp occasionally to help them and troubleshoot their issues. But primarily, these kids figured it out during the 3 weeks and they built it. So they measured, they drilled, and they glued. And keep in mind, these kids, most of them has never touched something like power tools and drills in their life before. They even welded the first time they put their hands on something like this, and they painted the chimes. And this was the last day of the camp. So they just completed their project the day before. They are waiting for their parents to come and pick them up. And they can't be prouder than this. They can't be happier than this. They're so excited to share what they did and then tell the story of their camp to their parents. So here, another interesting thing about this swing is we intentionally made them oversized. So these are not the swings you can rock by yourself. This is communal swing intended to be shared with friends, and you need another friend to rock the swing. You cannot rock it by yourself because it's too big to do that. So there are certain ideas of social interactions built into the design. So another type of swing we call the trapeze swing. And this is our version of the tire swing shared with friends. So you can see the expression on her face. She's having a pure bliss at this moment. She has, and all these kids have a lifetime story to tell to their friends and family when they get back home. This is a project in Newark, New Jersey for a college dormitory courtyard for Rutgers University Honors Living Learning Community. So Rutgers Honors class is a little unique because they're not the ordinary college students. They came from different walks of life. There are people like veterans, single moms, immigrants, who has a different experience together here as an honors college. So what we did was design this courtyard, but also provide the improvement for the parking garage facade you see on the right. So there was this typical prefab parking garage facing one side of the courtyard. And we designed this, we utilized and designed the super graphic to improve the facade. So we wanted to celebrate the diversity in Rutgers New York campus because Rutgers University New York has the highest and the most diverse campus in National University since 1997. And Rutgers New York is also home to international students from about 33 different countries. So to celebrate that kind of cultural and ethnic diversity, we decided to use those 4 keywords: honors, living, learning, and community, and translate it into the most commonly spoken languages on the campus. So you see here Spanish or Portuguese because there's a large Portuguese Brazilian community in Newark area, the Ironbound neighborhood we talked about in Mulberry Commons project. African immigrants who speaks French, Chinese students, Arabic students. So when these students coming to this courtyard, they can find the 4 keywords in any of their languages that they grew up with, they're familiar with. And at that moment, he makes this place into his very personal space, his safe space. And he can start to tell his own story about this plaza. The last project that I want to talk about is the LaGuardia Airport's new Terminal B in New York City. If any of you are familiar with the LaGuardia, it's infamously memorialized in President Biden's speech about being a third world airport, which triggered and accelerated the development of the new terminals. And New York City is now rebuilding all of its airport terminals, LaGuardia, JFK, and Newark Liberty International. And the LaGuardia Terminal B was the first one to get rebuilt. And from the worst airport in the country, possibly one of the worst in the world, it became the best airport actually in the world. Like last year, LaGuardia Terminal B was voted as the best new terminal in the world by Skytrax, who rates the world airports. And it became one of the only two 5-star Skytrax rated airports in North America. So it came from the worst to the best, a very huge curve for this airport. So when we started the design, we had two goals. The first goal was to create a sense of place for this airport. So it sounds obvious to us landscape architects, but if you think about airport space, airport used to be no place. There was no sense of place in airport. It's a big, grand civic architecture. But if you think about it, like airport in New York City would look no different from airport in Atlanta or Toronto or Dallas. They all look very similar. So this new trend in airport design is to represent the kind of local sense of place, which only makes sense because this is the new gateway to the city, and it should represent, in this case, the New Yorkness. When you arrive at the New York airport, it should feel like you landed in New York, not in Toronto or Dallas or Atlanta. So naturally, the first place we looked at was the great public parks in New York City. We looked at the mall at Central Park, the pathways and at the Riverside Park. And specifically, we looked at the beautiful shade pattern of the forest and the trees on the walkways. And that became the inspiration for the paving patterns of the Concourse Park in this case. And that's how it became the reality. So like a lot of people who arrive at this park talk about the paving pattern. Like it looks so cool, I've never seen anything like it. But now you understand where it came from. They are reminiscent of the kind of cloudburst shade pattern of the forest floor of the New York City public parks. The second goal we had when we started the project was kind of ironical, but creating an airport park that doesn't feel like airport at all. Because if you think about the airport is always a very stressful place. You are either late for your flight or your flight is canceled. You're waiting for your flight. You have all these bags. You have a kids stressed out. So the last thing we wanted to do was adding another airport experience to that. We didn't want to make it look like fancy looking airport lounge with some plants and vegetations. When people arrive at this park, we wanted people to forget for a moment that they are at an airport, and then instead make them feel like they are at a New York City public park with a fresh breath of air, trees, and greenery. So to that extent, we also used the furnishings that are familiar to New York City parks instead of typical like heavy leather and stainless infrastructure looking furnishings. Now, these benches, plantings are designed to remind people of great New York City public parks. The other interesting thing about this park was the use of plant materials. So half of the plants you see are real plants, and they are the lush understory plants. But the other half are actually faux plants. They are artificial or preserved plants, and they are the trees. And we had a lot of discussion with the client among ourselves, and we made the conscious decision to use faux trees supplemented by real lush understory. So that way, we can achieve these kind of large canopy experience of the trees as if you're in a park forest with the real genuine understory planting experience. So it can be controversial in a way, but the way we approached it was instead of delivering real nature with a limited capacity, we deliver a genuine experience of nature instead of an actual nature. And we thought that would be equally important. And in this case, if we were to use the real trees, we could probably do it, but the size of the trees would be limited. We won't be able to have a big trees. Trees likely to be will need to be replaced after several years because this is essentially not an ideal environment for trees to grow. And we will basically keep all those real trees in hostage on a life support system until they get replaced. So we thought maybe that's not really an healthy way to do it. Why don't we use these 4 trees that deliver the equal experience of being in a park? So we went to the highest quality tree fabricator. So these are not like typical tree fabricator. These 4 trees or preserved trees are the same quality trees that you find in like places like Museum of Natural History. So when we chose those 4 trees, we also intentionally made them with the species that have these very expressive the bark patterns and colors and texture. So you have these black cherries or the birch trees, serviceberries and poplars that have distinctively different colors and textures and patterns. And those tree trunks are where people get right up close when they get to this park. So those are important to create that experience of being in a park. So with the right balance between highly lush understory real planting and well-crafted faux and preserved tree trunks, we could deliver a real experience being in a park. So everything you see here, we designed them from the paving pattern, the architectural tile, GFRC precast seatings, benches, and of course the plantings. The GFRC seating modules were digitally fabricated using standardized modules to facilitate the fabrication, easy fabrication. So we were able to create a very organic shape using those limited modules. But we intentionally made them look a little bit rough, so they are not highly stylized or streamlined. They are more organic and even kind of coarse compared to those kind of fancy stylized the bench system. So this is, I think at the end of the COVID when we took these photographs, so people just started flying. And then I went back, I think 2 years ago during the spring break. This is when people really started flying again. And I was very happy to see how the people use this space. especially like this little kid. I was so happy to see him just playing on the floor, and his mom just let him play on the floor. And then you see these people doing what they do in the city, like eating lunch, working on their laptop, talking to friends, chatting with the strangers. So I was very excited that we were able to recreate a piece of New York City here that represent the sense of place in this New York City airport. So everything we see here, it feels just like a good street corner in New York City, a sidewalk cafe, or a good pocket park the city is known for. And these people all tell their own story of their city life and this airport. So I'd like to conclude my talk on a high note. So I was honored that I was elevated to a fellow last year. And as a co-chair of the DEI committee in ASLA New York, one of my goal in this initiative is to elevate more BIPOC fellows at ASLA New York. So if you're not familiar with a fellow, the nomination and elevation of BIPOC members to fellows level is among the highest honors that ASLA bestows on its members. So BIPOC members to be elevated to a fellow is an important thing. It's a big deal. But in ASLA New York, which is supposed to be one of the most diverse place in all of our chapters, we elevated 53 fellows since 1974. But only one of them were BIPOC fellow until 2020. But things were changing to a better direction. So 3 BIPOC fellows were elevated at ASLA New York in the last 3 years. And luckily, I was one of them. So now ASLA New York has 4 BIPOC fellows, 2 Blacks, 1 Latinx, and 1 API, which is myself. So still there's a lot more work to do. But why is it important to elevate BIPOC fellows? Because being a fellow is important, not just because it means you design something really cool. It means it recognizes the contributions to the profession and society at large based on their work, leadership, knowledge, and service. More importantly, to become a fellow, it requires exceptional accomplishment over a very long period of time. And oftentimes that requires certain amount of mentorship and the guidance. So some leaders are born, but a lot of times leaders are trained, they're guided, and they become leaders. But oftentimes BIPOC professionals do not have access to that kind of mentoring and guidance because we're just too busy to stay afloat and to stay and survive in our profession. We don't have a bandwidth to think about contributions in societies oftentimes. But we can change that with the right guidance and mentoring. So that way, with these mentoring and guidance, we can elevate more BIPOC professional to fellows, but more importantly, to the leadership roles in our profession. So when you get elevated to fellow, you go to the fellow ceremony, and you can purchase a table, and you can invite people who are important to your career. So oftentimes people invite their friends, family, people who help them in their career to become a fellow, important people, famous people, like other fellows. So I purchased the table. I could invite 10 people to my table. I thought about who I should invite. I could invite my friends or mentors, famous landscape architects that I work with. And then I thought about maybe I should invite future fellows instead of current fellows. So I decided to invite future BIPOC fellows, the future leaders that I thought who should become the next fellows in our profession. So I invited people here like Asia Wright, who was a Black graduate student, a very bright student at Rutgers University. Stephen Lee, Associate Principal at SWA New York office. Jiyoung Nam, another Associate Principal, SWA Houston office. Ann Chen here was the ASLA New York's 2023 DI National Conference grant winners. Jihao Zhang is the acting director of the Landscape Architecture program at City College of New York. So all these people, I want them to come to my table and see themselves as the future fellow. I want them to feel like this is something that can happen to any of them. So I might be the first API fellow in ASLA New York, but certainly I won't be the last. And I surely hope, and one day, becoming a BIPOC fellow is not even a news, it's not even a newsworthy story. So that concludes my talk on landscape, people and their stories. And I'd like to open the floor to any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them.
Well, Jen said, thank you for sharing these projects.
Well, thank you, Jen. So Jen and I actually presented the the DEI initiative together at ASLA New Jersey conference earlier this year.
It's awesome. I have one question for you. What was your inspiration to start your own firm?
Oh, I think that's a $1 million question to anyone who studied their own farm. So, well, probably like many of you, starting my own practice as always in the back of my head. But I've been working with a few firms that are really influential in my formative years, and I wasn't sure when would be the right time to start my firm. But then I started out at Hargraves Associates in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That's my first training. And I moved to field operations in New York, which really studied my kind of middle-level manager to leadership role. And then I went to AECOM New York office as a director, which really became my leadership training there. And then I started my firm. And when I started my firm, the main reason was to be able to serve the client that I like to serve, the projects that I think more importantly, I wanted to work on the projects that I believe is important. And when you work at a larger firm, especially at a larger firm, a lot of times that decision is not solely yours. There are times that you have to give up a project, even if you feel that it's a really important project. It has a great benefit to the community. There are many issues beyond your control, such as budgets, profits to the company, all sort of things. So as a company, I understood them. They are also important part of our practice, not to be dismissed. But to my own value, it was important for me to be able to work on the project that I believe important. And that's why I started my own firm.
That's awesome. Looks like Mariana, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Taewook. My question is about the balance between design and maintenance. It feels that sometimes we need to sacrifice a lot of the design potential to give way to the maintenance needs. In your opinion and with your experience, how much do you think we should give up, right? Because at the end of the day, we decide what's the urban space going to be, placemaking for all citizens, but sometimes the dreams and the ideas don't come true. So what would be your suggestion on that topic?
No, that's a great question, especially when you work on a public space. The maintenance, you cannot ignore maintenance. It's oftentimes the final question to the client's mind. And when you work on the public project, you usually work with different group of people. You work with the main client who is interested in innovative design. And then you work with the people who initiated the project, who pays for the project, to whom the budget and finishing the project in time is the most important. And then you talk to the operator, maintenance people who actually operates and maintains the landscape, to whom the ease of maintenance was the prime importance. So you cannot ignore any one of them. Great innovative design, finishing it in time, in budget, and creating a landscape that is not overly burdensome to maintain. But a lot of times, you can probably saw in many of the projects that I showed, they are public parks, so they cannot be too elaborate.
Hey,
They
kiddo, just saying
cannot,
I'm ready when you are.
yeah, they cannot be too high maintenance. So typically the materials are more durable. The design is relatively simple compared to like commercial or the private sector projects. But we pay more attention to the programming, and we expect people who comes to our park and landscape becomes the important part of the design. So to me, when we finish a design, or when we complete a park, when we build a park is only half completed until the people come and do things in the landscape. And the other half of the design is really completed by people who do their activities in the park or landscape. So that way we don't have to create overly burdensome or elaborate landscape. We can keep our design relatively simpler, lower maintenance, but we can still create a great landscape with these people in the park.
Thank you.
We have another question in the chat from Abby. He says, with such a wide range of projects, how do you find what you are going to do next?
That is a $1 million question, Abby. So how do I find what I'm going to do next? I'm going to do whatever that comes my door next week. So really, I always wanted to do a wide range of work, so I didn't want to pigeonhole into certain like practice line or practice type. By doing intentionally different things keeps kind of my interest and energy and creativity going. But that also makes it a little more difficult for kind of continue the client, expanding your client base, because you have to constantly talking to different people for different projects. So maybe it's slightly off from your question, but I found that very useful, especially when you're going through hard times. So when we were in good economy, people tend to focus on certain clients. So good example was people who were doing like private development work. When I went through the recession through like 2008 through 2010, I was working at AECOM, a large company with many different practice lines. And people who were in private sector practice line suffered greatly. Many of them had to go because company liked them to focus on certain practice line. But then when the project disappeared, they couldn't stay. I was not on any particular practice line. I like to kind of jump between different practice line, doing different things. So when one project or one practice line was disappearing, I could switch to so I was able to focus on the public realm, and when the private sector work comes in, I could switch to the private sector. So it allows you to be more versatile and adaptable to different economic climate. So I think that maybe that didn't entirely answer your question, but I think that was another good reason to stay more versatile rather than focus on certain types. But again, it's really running your own practice, meaning you don't choose your work chooses you. And you should just be ready to any type of work that comes to your door.
All right. Looks like we don't have any more questions. Teu, I'd like to thank you for your time, and also I'd like to congratulate you on being elevated to a fellow. So thank you for your time here today. Thank you for sharing your stories, and thank you for everyone joining us tonight. And I hope you all have a great rest of your night.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, everyone, and good
Thank you,
night.
Taewook.